Caleb Rusk saw the white sheet before he saw the child. It hung across the wagon road, tied from one mesquite branch to another, snapping in the hot wind like a surrender flag raised by somebody too small to know what surrender meant. His bay gelding Cinder stopped without a tug on the reins. Caleb did not curse the horse. Cinder had survived 3 winters, 2 gunfights, and more bad trails than most men had bad memories. She could not have been more than 8. Her dress was sun-faded brown. Her face was streaked with dust, and one sleeve hung torn where it had been ripped and tied around her left foot. The other foot was bare, blistered raw against the pale road. She held a kitchen knife in both hands, not like a weapon, like a door latch, like it was the last thing she had left between her and the whole world. Caleb kept his right hand open and visible. "Put that down," he said. "You'll cut yourself." The girl lifted her chin. "I already did." The answer was so plain that Caleb had no answer for it. He looked past her at the sheet. There were brown stains near one corner. Old blood, maybe, or medicine spilled by shaking hands. Beyond the mesquite, the country rolled dry and empty toward the Black Fork Hills. No house in sight, no smoke, no sound except wind. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nora Bell." "How far did you walk, Nora Bell?" 7 miles to Mason's Well," she said. 7 back. Caleb looked at her feet again. "Why?" Her grip tightened on the knife. "Because my mother is burning up, and everyone in town said no." The old part of Caleb, the part that had once worn a Marshal star and believed a straight answer could still make a crooked world pause, went very still. "Who did you ask?" "The doctor first," he said. "Fever work had to be paid before he rode out. Then Mrs. Vale, because she and Mama used to trade hens. She shut the door and cried through it. Then Preacher Ames. He prayed over me in the yard but would not hitch a team. Then Sheriff Baines." Caleb knew that name not well enough. "What did Baines say?" "He said women who make land trouble ought to expect lonely days." Caleb had been riding north for no reason worth naming. After his wife Ruth died, he had discovered a man could keep moving so long that motion began to resemble purpose. He had crossed towns without buying supper, slept under wagons he did not own, and taught himself not to enter other people's fires. Now an 8-year-old girl stood barefoot behind a blood-stained sheet and asked him to step into one. "Your mother's name?" "Eliza Bell." "How long has she had fever?" "5 days. Yesterday she stopped knowing me. Last night she kept talking about blue thread and the hearthstone." Caleb swung down from Cinder. Nora backed 1 step. Not because she wanted to run, but because she had learned to measure every adult before trusting the shape of them. "I'm not here to hurt you," Caleb said. "You might leave." He took the knife from her hands gently, folded it in a rag from his saddlebag, and gave it back handle first. "Then walk fast," he said, "so I have to keep up." For 1 second her face changed, not into hope. Hope was too expensive for a child who had spent a whole day hearing. No, it changed into calculation. She had found a man who had not refused her yet. She ducked under the white sheet and ran. Caleb untied it, rolled it under one arm, and followed with Cinder at his shoulder. The Bell place sat in a shallow draw 2 miles off the main road, hidden behind live oak and dust. The cabin had been built by hands that could not afford mistakes. Straight corners, good chinking. A porch plank patched with barrel wood. A vegetable patch burned yellow at the edges but still fighting. A woman lay on a narrow bed beside the back wall. Eliza Bell was 30 or near it. One hand lay clenched on the sheet. Not weak, exactly, but as if even unconscious she was holding on to something. Caleb crossed the room and touched 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist. Fast pulse, too fast. He pressed the back of his hand near her throat. Heat poured off her. Nora stood in the doorway and watched him with her knife still wrapped in the rag. "I gave her water," she said. "Spoon by spoon. She coughs if I pour too much." Her face fell before she could stop it. Caleb looked around the room. "I've kept men alive through fever," he said. "That does not make me a doctor. It means we still have things to try." He sent Nora to the spring box with every vessel she could carry. He opened both shutters, soaked the rolled sheet, and laid it folded across Eliza's legs. He cooled her neck, her wrists, the hollows of her elbows. He got water past her lips a teaspoon at a time and waited for every swallow like a judge waiting on a verdict. At sundown, Eliza opened her eyes. They were clear for one breath only. She saw Caleb. Fear sharpened her face. "Nora?" "I'm here, Mama." Nora climbed onto the chair beside her. "I brought Mr. Rusk." "I did not bring him," Eliza whispered. "I don't know him." He stopped. Eliza looked at Caleb then, and something in that look struck him harder than accusation. It was not trust. It was not even gratitude. It was the exhausted suspicion of a woman who had been given too many reasons to believe help always came with a price. "Why?" she asked. Caleb wrung out the cloth in the basin. "Your daughter put a sheet across the road." Eliza closed her eyes. The answer seemed to hurt her more than the fever. "Blue thread," she whispered. "Under the hearthstone," James said, "if I ever had to prove it." Her voice broke apart. Nora leaned closer. "Mama?" But Eliza was gone again, sinking back into heat. Caleb looked at the hearth. There were 4 flat stones set before it. One had a blue thread caught in the mortar near the corner, almost invisible unless a man was looking for a dying woman's clue. He did not touch it yet. First the fever. All night, the cabin became a small war. Nora fought sleep from the chair. Caleb fought heat with water and patience. Cinder stamped outside when coyotes called from the draw. Once, near midnight, Eliza began to shake so hard the bed frame rattled. Caleb held her shoulders while Nora cried silently into both fists, because she had spent all her noise walking 14 miles and had none left for fear. By dawn the fever broke. It did not vanish. It loosened. Eliza woke under a clean, damp sheet, breathing like a person who had climbed out of deep water. Nora touched her forehead, then touched it again as if the first reading might have been mercy playing a trick. "It's lower," she said. Eliza turned her face toward her daughter. "You went to town." Nora's mouth folded. "All the way." Nora nodded, and back. Another nod. Eliza shut her eyes. He went outside, pumped water, fed Cinder, and looked over the property while the morning lit it piece by piece. The south fence sagged. The corral gate was tied with rawhide. A plowshare leaned under the porch, cleaned and oiled, waiting for a hand strong enough to use it. This was not a poor place. It was a place being squeezed. When he came back in, Eliza was sitting up with a quilt around her shoulders. Weak, pale, awake. "You found the thread?" she asked. "I saw it." "Then lift the stone." Caleb did. Beneath the hearthstone sat a narrow tin cylinder wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were papers, not many, but enough. A deed, a survey plat, 2 receipts from the land office in Cheyenne, a signed letter from James Bell to his wife. He had spent 15 years as a Territorial Marshal before grief made him put the star in a drawer and walk away from his own name. He knew honest paperwork. He knew forgery. He knew the smell of legal theft when it wore ink instead of a mask. "This land is yours," he said. Eliza's jaw tightened. "It has always been mine." "Then why is Baines calling it land trouble?" "Because Mercer Tull came here in April." Caleb, the name was not famous beyond the county, but it was heavy inside it. Tull owned freight yards, grazing rights, 2 saloons, and enough frightened men to make his wishes look like local law. "He said James borrowed against the land before he died," Eliza said. "He showed me a note with James's mark on it, said if I could not pay by harvest the claim transferred to him. James signed his name. He could read contracts by lamplight after a 12-hour day. He never marked with an X in his life." "Did Tull leave the note?" She gave him a dry look. "Men like that do not leave the knife after they show you the blade." Nora stood beside the table. "Can the papers stop him?" "They can," Caleb said, "if they reach the right hands. And if they don't," he folded the deed, "then men like Tull count on that." The nearest lawyer was in Mason's Well, a tired man named Abel Quince who kept his office above the feed store and his conscience in better repair than his roof. Caleb rode there before noon with copies wrapped under his coat, and the originals hidden again beneath the hearthstone. Quince did not smile when Caleb entered. Nobody in Mason's Well smiled at strangers who asked about Mercer Tull. "I saw Mrs. Bell weeks ago," Quince said after reading the papers. She had nothing but her husband's memory and Tull's threats. Memory is true, but it does not always stand in court. These stand. Quince read the Cheyenne filing number again. Then he went to his cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer, and took out a folder thick enough to explain the fear in town. 7 families, he said. Maybe 9. Same method. A supposed old debt. A document nobody may inspect. 2 riders at the door. A sheriff who loses interest before trouble has a name. Caleb rested one hand on the desk. "You were building a case. I was building a wall out of sand until you brought me a stone. Use it." Quince glanced toward the outer room. Caleb had noticed the young clerk before he sat down. New boots, clean cuffs, too alert whenever the Bell name was spoken. "Whose boy?" Caleb asked. Quince's mouth tightened. "Tull's sister's son." Caleb nodded once. "Then do not send a telegram from this office." "I know." "Do you?" The lawyer looked tired then, not offended. Tired in the way good men get when they have spent too long staying alive inside bad arrangements. "I know enough to fear what he hears. Fear is not a plan. You have 48 hours. Prepare affidavits, get names, get dates. I'll get this in front of Judge Harrow in Cheyenne." Quince stared at him. "That is a hard ride. So is 14 miles on blistered feet." On the road back, 2 men came out of the scrub and fell in beside him. They did not draw pistols. They did not have to. Men like that preferred distance between warning and crime. It made the crime look more reasonable when it arrived. The bigger one smiled. "Mr. Rusk," he said. "Mr. Tull appreciates neighborly concern. He wants you to know the Bell matter is private. Private matters do not require messengers. He also said to tell you he remembers Ruth Rusk." Caleb's hand did not move. That was the only reason the man lived through the next breath. The rider's smile sharpened. Said grief makes some men wise and some men careless. He hopes you learn the wise kind. Caleb looked at him, the way he used to look at men just before they realized a badge was not the source of his authority. Carry Mercer Tull a message. I'm listening. My wife's name is not a lock he can pick. The smile faded. And tell him if he sends boys to frighten a sick woman again, I will stop treating this like a land case. The riders let him pass. That night Caleb sat on the Bell porch with his rifle across his knees. Eliza found him there just after moonrise. She had wrapped herself in the old quilt and moved carefully, one hand on the doorframe, but her eyes were awake and steady. You should sleep, she said. So should you. I spent 5 days sleeping badly. I am finished with it. He almost smiled. She sat on the step beside him, not close enough to soften the moment, close enough to share the dark. Nora told me you buried your wife. Caleb watched the fence line. Children ask straight questions. She said you answered. She had earned it. A long silence passed between them. Then Eliza said, James died under that cottonwood behind the barn. Hart gave out with the post-hole digger in his hands. He had been trying to finish the west line before rain. There was no rain for 3 more weeks. Caleb said nothing. I used to think the cruelest part was losing him, she said. Then I learned the crueler part is how quickly the world measures what a widow can be made to surrender. The dark held that sentence. Caleb rose before Eliza heard the second sound. 4 riders came through the draw with lanterns covered, and 1 torch burning low. Eliza went back inside. For 1 second, Caleb thought she had obeyed him before he could speak. Then she returned with James Bell's shotgun. The lead rider lifted the torch. We were told this place was abandoned. Eliza stepped into the moonlight. This place has a deed, a witness, and a loaded gun. The rider looked from her to Caleb to the cabin window, where Nora's pale face watched from behind the curtain. He had expected a fevered widow, a frightened child, an empty road. He had not expected an old Marshal with death in his eyes and a woman too angry to tremble. Caleb raised his rifle just enough. Drop the fire. Ride. They rode. When the hoofbeats were gone, Eliza lowered the shotgun. Her hands were steady. Caleb crushed the torch with his boot. They will come harder now. I know. I have to ride for Cheyenne before Quince is ready. I know that too. You should not stay alone. I am not alone. She looked toward the dark, where 1 lantern had appeared on the ridge. Then another, then a third. Caleb frowned. Eliza's voice softened. Nora went to the Vale place after supper. I told her not to. She said she had already learned how useful no could be, so she wanted to try 1 more. Yes. By morning, 3 neighbors stood in the Bell yard. Mrs. Vale cried when she saw Nora's feet. Her husband would not meet Eliza's eyes at first, but he had a rifle and a bedroll. Preacher Ames came with 2 sacks of cornmeal and a face like a man trying to climb out of himself. They were late mattered, but they had come, and sometimes a town begins again with the people who arrive ashamed. Caleb left before the sun cleared the hills. He rode cinder-hard across dry flats and creek cuts, stopping only long enough to water the horse and change saddle blankets. By the second evening, he stood in Judge Silas Harrow's chambers in Cheyenne, with dust on his coat, and the Bell copy spread across a mahogany desk. Harrow was 70, lean and impatient with fools. He read the deed. He read James Bell's letter. He read Abel Quince's first 6 affidavits, written in a cramped hand and delivered by a boy Caleb had found at the relay station. Then the judge tapped 1 page. Tull's paper names Ephraim Coulter and Niles Weed as witnesses. Yes. Coulter died in 1881. Weed drowned in the North Platte in 1882. The note is dated 1884. Harrow removed his spectacles. Dead men do make poor witnesses. They make useful ones if nobody checks graves. The judge stared at the filing number again. The Bell deed is clean. Yes. And the pattern is wider than one family. Yes. Harrow began writing. By midnight, Caleb had an emergency injunction, an order compelling production of Mercer Tull's land papers, and notice to the Territorial Marshal to examine the sheriff's office in Mason's Well. He slept 2 hours on a bench and rode back with the papers inside his shirt. When he returned to the Bell place, the yard was full, not with riders sent to burn it, with wagons, families, the Vales, the Harkers, the widow Bren, 2 brothers from the South Branch, whose father had signed away pasture after Tull showed him a debt no one ever saw again. They had come because someone had seen the first lantern and decided not to be the last. Eliza stood on the porch, still thin from fever, but upright. Nora sat on the rail beside her mother, feet bandaged, eyes fixed on the road until Caleb rode in. "You came back," Nora said. "I told you I would. People say that." "I know." He handed Eliza the injunction. She read it once, then again, her fingers tightened around the page. "Tull can't touch the land, not without answering to Cheyenne." The yard changed when he said it, not loudly, no cheering, no music, just a breath moving through people who had been holding it for so long they had forgotten what air felt like. Abel Quince arrived the next afternoon with a satchel full of sworn statements and no clerk. "Where's the nephew?" Caleb asked. "Gone," Quince said. "I dismissed him for removing client records." "Did he?" "Not successfully." That was the first time. He was broad, polished, and calm in the way rich men are calm when they have paid other people to carry their panic. Eliza entered with Nora beside her. No one who saw them would mistake them for polished. Eliza's dress had been mended at the cuffs. Nora's shoes were borrowed and too large. Caleb walked behind them, not as a guard, not exactly, but as a man who had finally stopped pretending the road behind him was more important than the people in front of him. Judge Harrow called the matter. Quince began with the Bell Deed Book 18, witnessed by living men whose signatures matched the land office ledger. Then he laid Tull's claim beside it. A debt note dated 2 years after James Bell had settled every recorded obligation. A transfer clause nobody had seen until April, 2 witness names, belonging to men already in the ground. The land office clerk testified for 11 minutes. It was the quietest destruction Caleb had ever heard. No raised voice, no drama, just dates, ledgers, signatures, and the slow collapse of a lie under its own weight. Tull's lawyer tried to suggest confusion. Eliza took the stand and ended that. "Mrs. Bell," he said, "is it possible your grief made business matters difficult to understand?" "No," the courtroom stilled. "My grief buried my husband," she said. "It did not make me forget how he wrote his name. It did not make me invent a debt. It did not make dead men sign a paper. And it did not make Mr. Tull stand in my kitchen and threaten to take the roof from over my daughter." The lawyer looked at his notes and found no safer place to stand. Then Quince called the others, the Harkers. Mrs. Bren, the South Branch brothers, family after family, each holding one piece of the same machine, a visit, a paper, a threat, a sheriff who looked away. Yes, sir. A faint ripple moved through the room. She climbed onto the witness chair with her oversized shoes hanging above the floor. Quince asked about the day she walked to town. She told it plain. The doctor, the neighbor, the preacher, the sheriff 7 miles in. 7 miles back. The sheet across the road. The knife in the rag. A stranger on a bay horse who had not said no. Why did you stop him? Quince asked. Nora thought about it, because I had asked everyone who was supposed to help, she said. So I asked someone who wasn't supposed to. I thought maybe he wouldn't know the town rules yet. No one laughed, because every person in that room understood the town rules had nearly killed her mother. Tull's lawyer did not question the child. Judge Harrow recessed for half an hour. When he returned, he did not waste words. The Bell property stands under its original deed, he said. Mercer Tull's claim is dismissed in full. The documents supporting that claim are fraudulent on their face and contradicted by Territorial record. Tull's face did not change. His hands did. They closed slowly on the arms of his chair. Harrow continued. The pattern described here suggests organized fraud, coercion, and possible misconduct by local law officers. I am forwarding the full record to the Territorial attorney and ordering immediate review of all land transfers connected to Mercer Tull for the past 4 years. The gavel came down. One clean sound. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mrs. Bren began to cry without covering her face. Mr. Vale took off his hat and stared into it like he had found something there he did not deserve. Eliza put one hand over Nora's, and Nora looked across the aisle at Mercer Tull, with the calm satisfaction of a child who had watched a bully discover. The floor was not his. Outside the courthouse, Tull passed Caleb on the steps. You think a paper ends this? Tull said. Caleb looked at him. No, he said. A paper started it. People ended it. For the first time, Mercer Tull looked past him at the families gathered in the street. Not victims now, witnesses, neighbors. A town beginning to remember itself. He got into his carriage and left under the gaze of every person he had counted on being too afraid to stare. The ride back to Mason's Well took 2 days. At the Bell place, the white sheet still hung on the porch rail, washed clean and drying in the sun. Nora had refused to let anyone cut it for rags. It stopped a horse, she said. That makes it important. Caleb could not argue. A week later, the Territorial Marshal arrived. Sheriff Baines was removed before supper. Quince filed claims to restore 2 pastures and reopened 3 forced transfers. Mercer Tull's men became harder to find. Men like that are brave, only while the world agrees to look away. By autumn, the Bell South fence stood straight. The vegetable patch greened again after late rain. Nora's feet healed, though Caleb noticed she still kept a strip of cloth in her pocket whenever she walked the road. Not fear, he thought. Memory. Children keep proof when adults fail them. One evening, Eliza found him by the north pasture, where James Bell had meant to run cattle before death left the plan unfinished. You fixed the gate, she said. Fever had left her thin, but not fragile. Fear had passed through her and found no place to stay. I'm not a hired hand, Caleb said. I know. I'm not a marshal anymore. You keep saying that. He looked toward the road. It ran pale between the hills, open and empty and familiar. For 6 years he had trusted roads because roads did not ask a man to remain. Roads did not set a place at a table. Roads did not carry a child's hand into a courtroom and make him answer for what kind of man he meant to be. Eliza followed his gaze. "Are you leaving?" Nora sat on the porch rail with the clean white sheet folded in her lap, pretending not to listen with her whole body. Caleb thought of Ruth, and for once the thought did not hollow him out. It steadied him. She would have liked this place. She would have liked Eliza's iron spine, Nora's sharp eyes, the stubborn fence lines, the way a cabin could become a courthouse if the truth was defended hard enough inside it. He took off his hat. "No," he said. "I'm done mistaking motion for safety." Eliza said nothing. She did not need to. Nora jumped down from the rail and ran the sheet into the house, as if storing away a flag after the battle. The road remained where it was. So did Caleb, and for the first time in 6 years, staying did not feel like being trapped.